We're going to go straight into our 4-part series today because we're going to talk about and show you behind the scenes of structural editing from the perspective of what the actual details and elements that we're looking at, how we're doing that. And Christina is here to show you the software that we use as professional editors, and that's also available to writers. And she's going to walk us through the whole background there, why it's important to know about your story arc. We're going to go into scene arcs. So it's a lot of really put it to use good information.
Mhm.
And if at any time you're overwhelmed, please reach out to one of us. We'll be glad to help you. And again, remember, you can always find a story coach. That's what our editing does, and we'll help you through that. But this is really what we're doing behind the scenes to kind of give you a better understanding, a really good base ground foundation so that you can speak to your editors and also become a better writer, because this is what it's all about. And NaNoWriMo is the month for that. So Christina, I'm going to let you start. You
Okay.
can intro how you like, and because I know I'm pretty excited about what we have tonight. Story arcs, scene arcs, summary letters, professional software,
Yep.
coaching.
So first I want to say I might have gotten a bit carried away.
Nah.
Yeah, I've done a scene analysis of a very famous scene, and it was really fun to do. So there's a ton of information there. So there will be replays. We're going to look at it from the perspective of what a story coach editor would do for you or what you can do yourself. And the process is a little bit different, but there are a lot of similarities. And I want to share it with you in this way, because if you do decide to go from self-editing to using an editor, it helps you speak the same language. And it also shows you what you should expect from an editor. And as a writer, you should expect a lot. So I want to set you up for that. So this is partly to help you self-edit. So if you're writing NaNoWriMo, after it's done and you've had a break and, it's probably January, you can use the information to do that. And it's to help you if you do decide you want to work with a professional editor.
Right. And I think it's really important to mention that, editing is not a cheap investment. It's really one of the most, it's the largest investment you're going to make when you're in the creative phase there. And so you really should have high expectations and you should have demands, but you should know what you need. And I would say that's probably you don't know what you don't know. And that's why we're doing this here now, is that, it really helps you come in, have a communication, and be able to walk away feeling like you've made a good investment and you know exactly where your strengths are, your weaknesses are, and how your revisions are going to go next.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm gonna do a quick recap of what we did in the last 3 sessions. And like Joellen said, you'll get replays if you want to go back and watch those. I want to show you very quickly too the history of the story arc and why it's so important to understand it. And then we're going to look at my favorite scene in a Game of Thrones. And do basically, I'm going to do an edit of it and show you what it means to have a scene arc and what the story elements are in a scene. So
Great.
first, I just want to remember everybody, we're focusing on story editing. So this is a structural review and revision of your manuscript, focusing on characters, plot, settings, and the story you are telling. So we're not talking about line editing, copy editing, proofreading, all things editors at First Editing do, of course. We're talking of a subset of that.
Correct. And I'm just going to throw this little banner up here. It mentions when you're working with the editor, what their goal is to provide you 5 key deliverables, which is going to be the story arc, which we're covering tonight, the key scenes, like she mentioned, and then making sure it's balanced and themed, and a summary letter, which we hope to have enough time to get to also tonight.
Yeah. All righty. So when you story edit, and this is a recap from before, so I'm just going to very quickly remind you, it's after you have a solid draft, so that what you're looking at is the full structure of your story. It's before copy editing and proofreading, so you're not wasting time doing those things when you're still going to be revising and rewriting your scenes. And definitely before you send to beta readers or a professional editor, because you want to get the most out of them in your one shot. And typically you get one shot with a beta reader, so you want to make the most of it and have the best story possible.
Excellent.
Okay, so this is to do a full story edit. This is how editors used to do it. And lots of writers, but you need a spreadsheet and you need some sort of word processing. So of course, everything we're talking about today, you can do that way. We're not saying you can't. We're just showing you that if you're going to be serious about doing a story edit, you do need tools to do it besides just a flat Word file.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll just start with the story arc. We covered this before, so I won't really go into it. The books on the bottom are all books about structure that are very interesting to read and come at it from different angles. And the image you're seeing is the story arc drawn in Storyteller. And what you're looking at is the blue line is the recommended story arc, and the orange line is where your plot points should hit in a range. So it's not a dead-on thing. It's for you to understand where they should naturally hit in a story for how the reader really likes to experience a story in their brain. And it hasn't changed in ever for stories. So it's really important to understand this form and that you can break it, but it's best if you know why you're breaking it and have a reason for it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so maybe Joellen can just put up a little thing. If you want to try Storyteller, we're doing a one-day flash sale for this webinar only of 40% off, and the coupon code is first editing 40. So very easy to remember, and I'll show it at the end. I just didn't want to forget. Well, so okay, what you're seeing here, some of you who've been listening to me for a while know that we did years and years of research to look at and create Fictionary and look at the story arc. And the story arc, 3-act structure, basically started in 330 BC with Aristotle. And as you move forward in history, I picked some of the famous ones. So Joseph Conrad is the hero's journey. And it's a lot about mythology, but it still maps right into the story arc. It calls, for example, the inciting incident is a call to adventure. Then we move forward in time, and we have Christopher Vogler's writer's journey, and he's a simplified form of the hero's journey. And again, it maps right into the story arc that's in Fictionary. Then we go forward again to K.M. Weiland's book on structuring your novel, and fabulous book. If you haven't read it, it's really it's an easy to read book that follows all the same theory that we do. And she calls the inciting incident the inciting event, still the same thing. Jump forward in time again, and we've got Save the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody. And hers are broken out again differently, but all of the 5 key scenes are there. So when we created the story arc, we wanted to do it in a way that we picked the minimum number of points that will make your story better. And outside of that, of course, a writer can go and follow any of these and use the forms that are there. But our goal was to simplify it down to the inciting incident, plot point 1, the middle, plot point 2, and the climax. And so that's just a little bit of history of Fictionary. Okay, so now we get to the nitty gritty. So we're going to look at chapter 26, which is scene 27 within Game of Thrones, the first book, Song of Ice and Fire. And we're going to do an in-depth analysis. And this is the scene where Jon Snow meets Samwell Tarly, if any of you know the book. So there is a bit of spoiler alert in here, of course. Yeah, but it's old enough, and it was on TV or Netflix or whatever. So most people know the story. But what we're looking at, so Martin wrote this book. He wrote 1 scene per chapter. And that's a structural choice he made, and he's very consistent with it. You don't have to write a book that way. Of course not. There's a variety of ways you can structure scenes in a chapter, but this is how he chose to do it. He wrote every scene from a single point of view. And it's a great example if you want to look for a writer who has full control over point of view. This is one of them. Now, he has 9 points of view in the story, which is a lot, and yet it works. And the particular scene we're looking at occurs after plot point 1 in the story and before the middle. So John is gathering his team here, and he's at the Night's Watch at the Wall, and he is training some of the recruits. Okay, so what we're going to look at here. So here's where things differ between an editor and a writer. If a writer is self-editing, they've already written their draft, they're familiar with it. So when they come to a story edit, the first thing they're going to do is figure out where is their inciting incident, plot point 1, the middle, plot point 2, and the climax. An editor can't do that because they haven't read the book. So they start the other way around, and they're going to start looking at scene structure. And once they've read your book once and looked at every scene, they'll go back and do the story arc. And a good story editor will look at the story arc for you and will tell you which scenes they think are your key scenes, and or if they don't exist, they'll mention that, and if they are in the right range within your novel, and if they're covering the right things. So that's a lot, but that's what a story coach editor should do for you.
Exactly.
Yeah, so the structure of a scene. And this is looking at, these are all story elements that are part of Fictionary, Storyteller, and Story Coach. So there's an entry hook, there's a scene name, there's conflict, there's a middle, there's a climax, and an exit hook. And I chose these specifically for this example because it fits well with this scene we're going to cover. Different scenes will have different key elements, like conflict could be replaced by tension, for example. That it's way more important. There is no conflict in the scene, and that's okay as long as there's tension. Every scene should have an entry and an exit hook, and you should be able to name it, and it should have a middle and a climax. Okay, so let's start with the entry hook. So in this scene, John is there with his buddy knights, and they're practicing in the yard. And so he basically, at the very beginning, he's fighting. So he's practice fighting with Darian. And the opening image of this scene is him helping Darian. So right away, it shows John as a character who is generous with his gifts and sharing them. So they're in the middle of sparring, and Darian stops and he says, Darian broke off and lifted his visor. 7 gods, he muttered. Would you look at this, John? And so the whole audience, everybody in the yard turns and faces poor Samuel. And so the entry hook there is, who is the new recruit and why are they so interested in him? Okay. Then we get to, did I just skip a page? Nope, sorry. There we go. Okay. Then we get to the scene name. And so after the hook, Samuel, he's there, and the others realize that he's a lordling and he's overweight, and they're not being very nice about it. And the key thing here is this is the inciting incident for the scene. So John's the point of view, and what happens here is now he's no longer focused on, he wants to train all of his team, so he has the strongest fighting team. He's now focused on the new person he arrived, and the rest of the scene is about how he deals with the new person. So it's actually an inciting incident on the first page of the scene, which is really great for a scene structure. Okay, then we get to the conflict, and the commander at arms basically is telling one of the other characters, Halder, that he should continue hitting poor Samuel. And Samuel's not doing well at this point. He's getting beaten pretty badly. And basically the shakeup here is, John shook off Piff's hand and says, Halder, enough. And so he actually goes against the commander at arms. And now he's put himself in a place where he can't go back from this action. So it's a plot point 1 for the scene. He can't return from that. He said it. He shoved his friend's hand off his shoulder, and he stepped in between Halder and poor Samuel, and he's going to stick up for him. So he's at the point of no return. And brilliantly used by Martin. So the scene middle, as it turns out, John is back to coward. And it shows through a piece of dialogue where Samuel says, I wanted truly, I couldn't. I didn't want him to hit me anymore. He looked to the ground. I fear I'm a coward. My Lord Father always says so. And what this has done now, all of John's pals are now very disappointed that they backed a coward and think that John made the wrong decision. And so John now has to spend the rest of the scene recovering from everything he caused during the first of the scene. And that gives us the scene middle, just like you would have in your novel with the middle. John has gone from reactive to reacting to take care of Samuel to proactive to recover from all of these actions he's taken. Okay, and then we get to the scene climax, and I love this line. So it's where John uses Ghost, which is his dire wolf, to scare Rast. And right before this, John has gone to everybody and said they will stick up for Samuel and they won't let him get beaten by the others. And only one of their team says, I'm not doing it, and that's Rast. So they appear in the middle of the night. Rast is in his bed, and the sentence goes, John could hear Rast's rapid breathing as Ghost slept onto his chest. The dire wolf's eyes burned red as embers as his teeth nipped lightly at the soft skin of the boy's throat, just enough to draw blood. And then John says, remember, we know where you sleep. And that's all he says. And there's the threat. So now Rast is on their side. And it makes a beautiful scene climax because it shows that John has been very kind and is really brave standing up for Samuel, but he can also be really harsh and used his wolf to threaten Rast. And you can see how vivid this writing is, that it's to the senses of his breathing and the color of his eyes and the nipping at his neck. And it's one, little piece of a paragraph, and yet it's a great scene climax because now he's shown that he's very capable of being violent. Okay, so that is, I'm just going to stop there for a second in case, Joellen, there's any questions you want me to answer, because of course I can't see the comments.
No, I'm looking, and there's no questions as of right now, but they're watching it and they've asked for a more visual view. So sometimes I'm going to full screen just so they can see it all. But
perfect. Yeah, because there's quite a bit of content on here. I know that. Okay, so now that is what we've done here is the scene structure. So it's very similar to looking like you're looking at your story structure, but at your scene level. And if you imagine, if you just did this through every scene, so nothing else, just this, your story is going to be so much stronger because now every scene is engaging like an entire novel should be. And it's one of the things that keeps readers reading.
Exactly. And I mean, and that's what this is about. I think we really, really, really using these techniques don't let you get off track into the creative world where you're just enjoying it and creating worlds and characters, whatever, but you're really focused on how am I engaging the person? How do I make sure that they turn the page and stay with me?
Yeah.
And that's the scene hooks and the entry and the exit to make sure that there's this little addictive thing going on, this soap opera effect.
Yeah. So now we're going to look at storyteller and story coach break the story elements up into characters, plot, and setting. And so we're going to go through this scene at a character, plot, and setting level. So now we're going down one more level. And
okay, we do have a question. Sorry, I'm going to ask one more thing. She just we have a question from Elizabeth here. What about the exit hook? I'm trying to figure out what exactly
I skipped that one. That's a really good question. Here's the exit hook. That's the last part of it.
Yes, important.
Thank you for asking that. Yes. So the exit hook, of course, is where it's the opposite of the entry hook. So the entry hook engages the reader to start reading the scene, and the exit hook is what excites them about reading the next scene. And in this scene, at the very end, John and Samuel together, they obviously they build a relationship, and I'll show that as we go more into the scene. But really what the exit hook here is it's showing John's care of brothers makes his worry about his uncle much stronger than if there just had been a worry about his uncle, and it links it to the rest of the plot. And so right before the exit hook, he says to Samuel, we're not friends, John said. He put his hand on Sam's broad shoulder. We're brothers. And that takes John into a bit of thought, and he starts thinking of his uncle Benjen, who's disappeared, and we suspect he's off with the others and the White Walkers, but don't know. And so this is a reminder of, oh yeah, what did happen to Benjen? I have to keep reading. And it shows by this point in the scene, we understand how deeply John cares about the people in his life, and Benjen is one of them.
Okay. And we have one other question here. Is the scene climax the same as the exit hook? And it's not the same, but they're very close in the occurrence because of the way it outlines. But if you would like to talk a little bit more about that, that would be
great. So the exit hook comes after the scene climax, just like your resolution comes after the scene climax. So the scene climax could be John won the battle. Okay, there's no hook there, right? It's still a climax, but he won. Okay. Why am I reading
Exactly.
more? The exit hook comes after to go, John won, but there's more to come. And there's
Exactly.
lots of foreshadowing throughout this scene of the more to come. So by the time we get to this exit hook, the reader's thinking, I have to turn the page.
Exactly, and that's what it's about. So the next question here was, can you explain the exit hook? And basically, that is to make sure that they turn the page. It's that little bit of information that keeps you attentive. It's
Hmm.
specifically there for your reader to stay engaged and turn the page, and then you hook them again with the entry hook. So it's exit, entry, exit, entry.
And that's the flow of the story. And the exit hook, if you think of it like you're putting a question in the reader's mind, what happened to Benjen? You know, will Samuel survive since he's terribly a lousy fighter? Will John's relationship with Samuel be useful throughout the story? You know, whatever the question is, that's an exit hook.
Exactly.
And there
Okay.
can be more than one. I picked one out of this scene because it's the final one. There's lots of questions left with this scene.
Right. Okay. And if there's other questions, please feel free to keep putting them in. We may not be able to answer them all immediately, but we will do our best to answer as many as we can at the
Yeah.
end or
Yeah.
get back to you later. And again, you
Okay.
can always email us. Continuing on.
Continuing on. So just to back up to the scene structure,
Hmm.
entry hook, scene name, and in this case, it's an inciting incident. And the conflict in this case is a plot point one. Then we have the middle, the climax, and an exit hook. You don't have to have all of the story arc scenes in every scene. I'm just listing these here because it shows a brilliant use of them of what makes a great scene. And so when you're evaluating your scene, it is a good idea to look at, do you have some of the key points off of the story arc in the scene?
Very good.
Okay, so let's start with the character. And I'm only going to do some of the story elements because there's no way we can do it in an hour. So I've picked the
Yeah.
key ones, which I think make this scene just brilliant. So Martin has chosen Jon Snow as the point of view. And really, if you want to see an example of point of view control, this is a great book to read. So in this scene, there's the point of view goal, and it's to John's. You can see on the side, this is just a snapshot from the story arc within Fictionary, and showing the point of view goal of John is to train weaker fighters. And the goal gives the reader something to cheer for, and it shows John cares about others. So right away, we like him. And there's a goal that will have consequences. And so the opening line of this scene is John was showing Darian how to best deliver a side stroke when the new recruit entered the practice yard. Your feet should be farther apart, he urged. So John is totally focused on Darian. He's not focused on the new recruit. He's kind of acknowledged it's happening, but he's still practicing with Darian. And from this, we know that his goal right now in the scene is to train his fighters. And he's going to get distracted from that goal. All right. So the internal goal can be harder to find. And sometimes it has something to do with a character's inner flaw or need. And when you read through this scene, John's internal goal is to belong to a group. He has a need to belong that grew from being brought up as a bastard child and having Caitlin hate him. And Caitlin is his father's wife at this point in the story. And so he's grown up in an environment where he was with the family, but never belonged. And so at the night watch, when he's at the wall, he has this strong desire to belong there. And so that's his internal goal that he will be struggling with throughout the entire story. Then we have is the goal related to the plot. In this case, it's strongly related. So John's building a team. He needs this team of fighters by his side if they're going to beat the White Walkers. They're in a weak position, and there's lots of imagery within the scene showing that they're short on recruits. The whole wall is in bad condition and all kinds of things. So if John fails at having strong fighters, he's going to fail at the overall story goal. And the thing is, what if the goal fails? That what you're asking there, it doesn't have to fail. So this is really important. It can fail or it can succeed. But even if the goal succeeds for a scene, there has to be a consequence if it didn't. And in this case, if John fails at creating a strong team, the White Walkers are going to win. And John and all of the others are going to die. So it's strongly related to the plot, and there are really big consequences if he doesn't succeed. Okay, so now we're going to look at the scene, or the plot story elements, and we're going to start with the purpose. And the purpose of this scene is for John to build a team. So it shows readers where the Night Watch is starting from and how hard it will be for them to defeat the others. John has to recruit strong fighters, but also thinkers, and that's Samuel. So this is a typo here. Samuel is also the mentor in this. If you look at the hero's journey, he would be John's mentor. And so he has a very strong purpose as well, going along with the scene purpose. And he's going to help John as the story goes through with the knowledge John needs to defeat the others. Okay. So for tension, that comes when John disobeys the commander-at-arms. By this point in the scene, the readers care about John, and it gives the expectation that something bad is going to happen to him. Nothing bad has happened yet, but it will. And the reader's going to be worried that it will. And the reader's also going to be worried about Sam by the end of the story. And so it's a source of tension, not just for this scene, but it carries through in every scene they're in by setting John up as being super caring about his people, and Sam being very knowledgeable but terrible fighter. And so all the way through every scene they're in, this goes with them. And so it's tension that works all the way through.
Okay. And we have a couple people who are just asking questions, so I'm following this. I want to emphasize here that one of the comments was that, I'm sorry, but I can't relate to this text. I've never watched Game of Thrones, and it's too confusing for me. So what I wanted to point out is that it's not important what's happening in the scene per se, that you know the story, as much as it's very important that you understand that these are examples of the elements being used in the scene. So we're looking for conflict. This is how so basically you're looking at these two columns. The one on the left is is our checklist, and the one on the right is where we're filling that in to make sure that we've done it. If you can't fill in that blank, or if your editor can't find the element that goes into that blank, then your story or that scene is not as strong as it should be.
Yeah, Joellen, that's a really good point, because this is showing when an editor is reading your story, they are going to be looking at all of these elements, and they're going to have to figure out for conflict, okay, what is it in this scene? Is there conflict or not? And it's, it doesn't matter what the story is, right? It's that's the key point. And if you're self-editing, you need to look at it yourself and go, does my scene have tension or conflict?
Exactly. And so people are responding greatly to this. They really appreciate the scene maps, and they like this. So they're starting to understand a little bit more. And we had some other people who backed that they're not Game of Thrones followers.
Yeah.
So again, but this is behind the scenes, and basically just filling those in. And if the editor will do it or you're doing it, either way, but it's just making sure that everything is objectively quantified to ensure that we have the quality there.
Yeah. And so what I was going to say at the end, but I'll just say it now, is that it's totally worth, even if it's not your genre, doesn't matter. It's totally worth buying the ebook or a printed copy if you want it, and going to this scene and going through it with the replay, and you'll see the whole structure together. You can use it to see what I saw in the scene and why I mapped it to all of the elements. And if you really want to learn how to do these, it's a shortcut way of read one scene, and I've done all the hard work for you, and you can go through and highlight it or however you want to do it, but you can see everything that's there. So it was my homework I was going to get later.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I've been, the deeper you get into this, the more you find that any story that you read or any drama that you watch, especially series, I find myself going, oh, okay, that was the cliffhanger. Now we're going to go. So it's very addictive, but it's really good when you can identify these quickly.
Yeah. So here it's very quick. The difference between tension and conflict. The tension is the suspense that something bad is going to happen, and conflict, it's actually happening. So this starts in the scene when the Night Watch are all just fighting each other, and half are trying to beat Sam and the other half are trying to protect Sam. All right. So here, this scene is one of the best uses of backstory I can give to people. And if you have an issue with backstory and read this, you'll see how brilliantly it's done. And he uses dialogue, thought, description, a flashback, and weather, and it's all interwoven in action. And so it makes it really interesting. And he's chosen things that are important and related to the plot. So one of the I marked here as backstory, the key backstory is Samwell's, because we
Mm.
already know John's backstory mostly, even though he's the point of view character. And here is our introduction into Samwell. This is the first time he appears in the story. And so here it's important to know something about him because he's a key character that's going to go on through the rest of the story. If it was just a single person coming in, it's not so important, but because he is a key character and he's key to John, it's important to know things about him. And so it's just such a good example of backstory. And he chose, in my opinion, the most important piece of backstory he has shown in a flashback. And so the difference between backstory and a flashback is backstory is stuff that happened before the story starts. And a flashback is the same, except it's shown in an active way. So it's shown as a live scene within a scene. And in this case, he chooses out of all of Samuel's backstory, he goes to a flashback to the scene where Sam's father tells him, if you don't take the black and forsake your inheritance, I will kill you tomorrow in a hunt. And as he's doing it, he's slaughtering a deer. And so he's like, this is what you're going to look like. It's terrible. And so he starts the flashback starts with, you are almost a grown man now, and my heir, Lord Randall had told his eldest son, which is Samuel, his long knife laying bare the carcass as he spoke. And so this is how the flashback starts. And Samuel's telling this story to John, and then it jumps to a flashback. And it's full of imagery, and you're going to remember that this was part of his backstory out of anything else. And really, it's the threat of death. So here's the hint of death coming throughout the story. The scene middle we talked about already, so it's part of the plot elements, and it's where John decided to defend Samuel, and the others believe it was wrong, and now he's got to use his leadership skills to convince the others to protect Samuel. And the scene climax is not all of the knights agree, and including Rast, which is what I showed you. So here at the climax is where we go into John has shown he can lead both with kindness and with strength, and it's quite a vivid scene when he brings that wolf in there. Okay, so that's plot, and then we switch topics and we go on to setting. So
again, these are the elements that we're looking at as editors for you to use. And when you use a software such as Storyteller, then you can do it yourself, or you can hand it off to an editor who will take a look at it and then go through and they can fill it in for you. But it's basically making sure that nothing is overlooked. It's an important checklist so that we can ensure that everything is covered and you have the strongest story as possible. And it really, as she showed at the beginning, it's been used since the beginning of time.
Yeah, and the interesting thing too is when you get a story coach edit, you'll see all of these elements filled out. And so you'll see what the editor is thinking down to a really specific level of what's important in the scene. Like even the way an editor names your scene tells you what they think the scene is about. And so you get really interesting insights into your own story beyond just getting a normal edit with suggestions for revisions and such. You get to actually see what the editor is thinking as they're reading your story. So it's a very enlightening process to go through.
Very much so.
Yeah. So objects, location is the wall, is during the day. Objects he chose with care. And I picked one out, which is Samuel's sword. And the reason I picked that to put here is that the sword comes into play later in the story. So it's dropped here like the smoking gun, and it's used later. And it's an important piece. Now there's lots of objects in the story. And so the goal of your self-editing here is not to list everything in your scene. It's to list what's key so you can then check to see what scenes was it in and did you use it well and did you use it later is more important question. Not all senses, so sight, smell, sounds, taste, and touch have to be in every scene, and they're not used in this scene. I'll just pull out the first sight you see is John, his vision of what Samuel is wearing. And what goes through his mind is the fur collar of his embroidered surcoat was lost beneath his chins. Pale eyes moved nervously in a great round moon of a face, and plump, sweaty fingers wiped themselves on the velvet of his doublet. And what this is showing the reader and not telling them is that, one, Samuel is wealthy. Two, John has looked beyond his physical appearance to notice that he's nervous and he's sweating. And so it shows us some insight into John's character, that he looks beyond the exterior of a person. So it's got double purpose in sight without telling us those things, and it makes it really interesting. And you can do this with all of the senses. Okay. Emotional impact. So what this means, when you look at your story, or when an editor is looking at your story, the thing to look at is, where is the location, and is it the best place for emotional impact? So could it be put in another place within the story world and have a better or a stronger emotional impact on the story? And here the scene shows John in an environment that he can't leave, and where his commander doesn't like him and puts him in danger, like to so much of a point that he's in danger. And so he can't leave here, and he has to find a way to survive. And so in this case, the location is a great choice because it's highlighting John's struggles and it's highlighting the danger he's in. Okay. Then we have the location can split. And so if you're looking to set up your scenes within your story, places that you look for to do that are when the point of view changes, when the setting changes, so the location changes, or when the time changes. And in this case, Martin chooses not to do that. He has several locations in the scene, but he tells the reader very clearly that it's changing. So he says here, that afternoon, so we know time has gone by, the watch commander sent him to the wind cage with 4 barrels of fresh crushed stone to scatter gravel over the icy footpaths at the top of the wall. So we know John is now going from the yard to the top of the wall. We know the time has changed. We know he is hurt, and the job he's been given is barrels of fresh crushed stone. So, okay, that's got to be bad. So not only is it leading us into there's a time and location change, it's also, there's a little entry hook here right into the next piece of this scene. And the new purpose is just he's got to go gravel. But this is where I really want to point out, so using a tool like this, or if you're using Excel or whatever it is you're using, it's there to help you structure it and see your story in a different way. But the artistry comes into play here, where you make a decision on how you're going to do this. And in this scene, what happens is that the first part is intense battle, and then the next part we see John's reaction to it, and then where that leads him with Samuel, and where it's going to go, and how things work out with the rest of the knights who aren't happy with him. So it's an artistic choice at this point, but there's a cue to the reader. This is what he's doing. And then weather. So he uses weather to show backstory, but he uses weather in an interesting way. So throughout the scene that you can feel it is really, really cold. But one of the things he does is he uses it to show the difference between Samuel's ordinary world and his new world, so the reader understands more of his struggle. And at one point, Samuel says, "I never saw snow until last month." And then there's a bit of other stuff in there. And the men had crusts of snow in their beards and more on their shoulders, and it still kept coming. And so this has a dual purpose. One is Samuel's no longer in his ordinary world. And two, it's his backstory of how he traveled to get here and how it went from warm through the cold and how it affected him. And this is, of course, just a little snippet, but he's doing double purpose here with his words. And again, he's showing the reader it's cold, not telling them it's cold.
Exactly.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So that's the end of that. I just want to remind, before we go on to the summary letter, that we do have a flash sale just because everybody came to the fourth one. So we thought, why not? So if you want to try Storyteller, it includes a 14-day free trial. So you can try it, no risk, to see if you like it. But if you do, use the first editing 40 code and to get your 40% discount. Okay. So I'm going
Okay,
to
perfect.
out of here and come
Excellent.
back to you.
What I want to say is that we've got a question about it was great. So if I do all the work in Storyteller, then am I able to hand it all to an editor? Done. And this is a very important part of what we're showing you here is that, editing, like writing, is a process. It takes time and dedication and practice, practice,
Mm-hmm.
practice. So
Yep.
what this allows you to do is become a better writer because you can write inside the software. And you can also do a lot of the elements that would be considered for structural editing at the same time, or one after the other, however you work.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you've completed this, you can either hand that off to an editor, and what a good editor is going to do and look at it and say, okay, which stage are you in your writing process or your editing process? And what's the strength of your manuscript? And then they're going to tell you, oh, great, you're completely done with structural editing. We can move forward. Or they're going to go back and fill in all the blanks that maybe you're struggling with, which
Mm-hmm.
is really, really great. We're going to go to that in a moment, just of what you get from your editor to help you go into the revision stage. Or if you're one of those really quick studies and you do really, really well, obviously you can move right into line editing or even copy editing, depending upon your strength. But you're going to go to line editing, make sure your voice and your tone and it's all consistent and that your details are not confusing or misleading in any way. And the reason why we talk about these is that when you're doing structural editing, you're not line editing, you're not copy editing. We're not doing, we're not comparing things on the minor syntax, grammar, spelling, punctuation. We may comment on that to help you become stronger, the same way that an intelligent assistant or, a copy editing software does. However, not going to make the changes until we actually have the structure in place. So we're getting, the foundation of the story in the right order with the right amount, the word counts balanced, the theme, all of those things are going on. And then you can proceed onto the line edit and the copy edit to make sure that you're complete. Did I leave anything out there, Christina?
Nope,
No.
that was a very good summary.
Okay, good. So one of the important things that you get if you opt to not do this yourself, and it's a lot. It's a learning curve. I mean, that's obviously we put all of our editors through training to use the software. And it's not easy training, by the way. Those of you who are really love to learn, you can go ahead and take it. You can go ahead and certify yourself. But when you're done with this is that the editor also uses all of their background, all of their experience in having helped other authors in your genre, which is very, very important. So, many of you said, oh, I'm not familiar with Game of Thrones. Well, then, that's a perfect example there. You want to work with somebody who can speak the same language, who has the same thoughts, the same interests, the same passion for writing in the same way. So that editor is going to use their experience of that genre, the word count, which is appropriate for that genre, the length, the pacing, the different things that go into making the story engaging for your desired audience, because your audience needs to be identified from the very beginning. And then they're going to help you do that. So they're going to give you more information than just, okay, what's your entry hook, your exit hook. They're going to talk about, well, it needs to be a little bit more romantic, or it needs to be, whatever way they're going to comment on that to really engage, and they may refer other examples to help you see what's missing there. So that's very, very important.
Yes, I would just want to follow on that comment. So here's what's happened to me after I've spent years and years researching this and studying books and things. And prior to Fictionary, my go-to book, I like murder mysteries. That's what I read. I don't really read anything else. So you wonder, why did I do Game of Thrones? Well, I've edited, I don't know, 30 books in the last few years of all genres. And what I have learned is a good story is a good story. And it doesn't matter if it's sci-fi or it's fantasy or it's thriller or romance or whatever. The key thing is to get that good story down and then work on your genre techniques, so that if you don't have a strong story arc, it doesn't really matter the rest of it. You need to have that first and then your genre stuff. And this is where I mean, an editor who specializes in different genres will come in and evaluate. If you're doing a romance, they'll go, these are the key scenes you need for a romance on top of the
Yes.
story arc, because every single genre needs those story arc scenes. They might be a little bit different in what they offer to the reader, but the fundamentals behind it are there. And so it's the story arc is probably the most critical thing you can learn, and then move on to genre stuff.
Right. And this is so important that you understand that this is the stage one. You know, this is the first stage of editing.
Yes.
You've just finished your manuscript. You've got beginning, middle, end. You know what's going on there. You've got it all laid out. So then you're having yourself or your structural editor go through and do this. And what we're talking about is using, you know, we started with Excel because that's how traditionally had it. But fortunately, technology is moving so fast that now we have the availability of using this licensed software to really be objective, because editors, you know, we're human. We have creativity and we have our objectivity, and so we need to have a good combination of both. And that's why we're showing you behind the scenes so that you understand what we're looking for. And
Yep.
it also means that if you can't do this, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong. It means that maybe you can get the right help. Like you can find your weaknesses very quickly and get some really strong professional feedback, some really strong, as we say, coaching on how to finish up the story and move along and get onto your next revisions, because it is a process, but it's very good there. I know we're running short on time. We only have a couple of minutes here, but if we can flash up some of the summary letters, which is what you get when you use a professional story coach, an editor who's certified in using this type of software and also is vetted as a professional editor, that this is what you're getting. And I'm going to go ahead and get together our sample, and I will email it out to everybody this next week. So I'm going to send you some goodies as follow-up. So please make sure you're watching your emails. It's going to be coming to you from editors@firstediting.com. You're going to get an ebook from us. You're going to get the replays of all the documents. You'll have links where you can get the handouts, and I'm going to send you the story coach professional sample that basically explains how this works. And you can use that either to understand the concept yourself and go ahead and go over to Storyteller at fictionary.co and sign up. And then, you know, you come to us after you finish that. If you're a do-it-yourselfer, then you come to us and we can take a look. And if you've done the structural edit, then it's the best time to engage a line editor and get that professional editing done there.
Okay. Can you see my
head? I am seeing it, and it's added. Here we go.
Oh, perfect.
And
okay.
8 minutes. So
we have 8 minutes left. I'm going to skip. So this is a 23-page summary letter on a novel that a story coach editor did. And so the beginning part is just a quick overview. It's instructions to the.
Can you go to full screen on that, please? Because this is about the summary letter, and these are different sections in the summary letter, depending upon how your editor approaches it. So it's totally fine to look at it this way. And
the most important thing a story coach can give you is an evaluation of your story arc. And so you know fundamentally if your story is working or not. So in this letter, what the editor did was just a screenshot of what the story arc looked like for this novel within Fictionary. And you can see plot point 1 is too late and the middle is too early, but the rest looks pretty good. So that's fine. And so the editor goes on with the description of what the inciting incident is. And in this case, I'm not sure which scene is the inciting incident. So I marked an early scene so the story arc would draw. So in this case, the editor couldn't even find the inciting incident and put it here so that it would draw. They go on to explain why it's important. And here's an example of what the author should be looking at. So it's a hint of, it's not writing it for the writer, but it's a hint of try looking at this because these are your characters and who should be in there. Plot point 1, it's very late in the story. And so there's a description here that it's late and what it makes this story feel rushed. And this is going to have to be reworked. In the middle, was too early, and then plot point 2 and the climax are perfectly positioned. So this writer now knows, okay, I have to have an inciting incident. I have to reorganize my story so that my plot point 1 and my midpoint hit in better places, but my plot point 2 and climax are good. So I want to make sure when I revise, they're going to be there. Then there's just a description of how to use the story map. And this editor has gone on to talk about the cast of characters, the character arcs, the point of view. And on the point of view, there's some head hopping in this story. And so the editors pointed that out. And then the story map, they'll show which scenes that it has it. Right. Talk a little bit about description, repetition, dialogue. So here is where, again, the editor is using, so the purpose of each scene. And here, it's really, I wish I could do this bigger because it's hard to see this, but in some of the purposes,
again, we'll send out an email, so we'll give them a better idea of what we're going on. So
some of the purposes that the editor didn't know what the purpose was, and so Mark don't know yet, and the writer can go right into the story map and go and find those scenes and see which ones, and then they can go and fix those scenes to give them a purpose. And so here's the description and how to do that. The opening closing types, the editor fills out as you go, and this is just a screenshot of the opening types. So the opening types are balanced, so it's fine. And then the closing types are a little unbalanced. So here you can see that this writer has used dialogue and thought way more than description and action. And so there's a description here of how to change that around. Entry and exit hooks, the editor has pointed out where there are no hooks, using an X, and where it's really good, using a check mark. And then the editor can also put in, if they want to say, oh, there is one, but you need to make it stronger, that sort of thing.
Exactly. So basically, we're going through all of the story elements and all the different sections of the book as much as we can. And what I want to mention is that this is cross-referenced inside your document within the notes there. And so the advantage of this is that basically you can go into the section, you'll see your manuscript, you'll see all the sections that have been filled, you'll see your old style track changes in there. So there'll be notes and comments inserted, and you can put those in there. But one of the things I love most for new writers who are self-editing or who have hired us and have no idea, and this is the first time, and they just want it done for them. What we have inside the system is that there's these little links that are always information. It's like a library of all the terms that you need to understand. And you can come back to them at any time. When you have a consultation, it's great, but you tend to get so much information from your editor that, even with the best of notes, it may or may not click in completely. Having this as a reference lets you come back and edit it and do your revisions after the fact without any worries. And of course, you can still reach out back to your professional story coach, and we'll be glad to help you through that. So, Christina, I know you have a hard stop in 2 minutes.
I do.
So I'm just going to pull up the comments here and see if there's anything that we're missing, and I'll take the rest afterwards. I'm going to stick around for 3 minutes afterwards because I see some about the cost of editing and things. And then somebody mentioned that they didn't get the emails. Please check your emails for Eventbrite, were the primary ones, and then now you should be getting them from editors at First Editing. So let's see. Software, again, the name of the software is Storyteller, and we use it as professional editors under the name of Story Coach. And there is a free trial there, right, Christina?
Yeah, so you can find it at fictionary.co, and you can